Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a couple European nightcrawler worm bins that are right down there on the shelf. And today they're 182 days in service. That's, in my mind, exactly half of a year, 26 weeks. And over the last 64 days, they've been working on a little experiment for us. They were given a wool sweater. I took a sweater and I cut it in half, so half went into each system. And well, the hope is that they're going to end up consuming that. I've done cotton in the past numerous times, and the worms have eaten the cotton happily, but I've always understood that other natural fibers, wool, silk, are all fair game for worm bin composting. As far as how long it'll take, though, I've got no experience, don't know what to expect. In the past, I've always treated cotton as sort of a 100-day material that the worms can do away with, depending on numerous factors. So at day 64, I'm wondering if we're going to see any results or any progress. So we're going to get these two systems up on the bench and see how they're coming along. We'll give them some food too while we're at it. So let's get to work. I'm pretty sure I've touched on most of the stats that I've listed here, except for a couple, so let's run through these really quick and we'll get to work. It's been 11 days since the last check-in. I don't think we mentioned that earlier. And as far as feedings go, there have been 16 so far, and this will be feeding number 17. So here we've got a pretty good sized collection of used coffee grounds. So we're going to give them some of this, and this is an unusual thing. This is a ground up corn cob, which I've done before in the past. And the stuff's been sitting around for a while now. So we're going to treat them to a feast of pretty small particle size type foods. Stuff that I guess we'll have to see how they do as far as breaking it down for us. I mean, coffee, for example, being a small particle size food, I often find lingering as leftovers in the worm bins, surprisingly. As far as the shredded corn cob, that stuff's kind of dry. It might need a little while to get rehydrated, but my hope is that it's something that the worms are going to enjoy nibbling on. So that's going to be their meal. I could see that we got a good many springtails occupying the system, and it also seems like the plastic coverings have been doing a nice job helping the systems hang on to their moisture content. So let's explore. This was a banana stem that I just encountered over there. Here we've got another one. Sometimes I like to just open them up and sort of help along the breakdown process. I think in the back of my mind what I'm curious to see is whether or not we're going to encounter a worm tucked up inside the banana stems. So let's get on to seeing how the worms are doing in here. There's something that goes a way back. That's the shell of a chestnut. And let's see here. All right, so last time we fed, oh boy, certain things just refuse to break down. Certain things just want to keep on growing. And here we have some chunks of Brussels sprout, which I couldn't even tell you how long it's been since it was added to the worm bins, but it appears to be continuing to grow. In the past, I've encountered things like this, stuff that want to continue to grow, and I usually tolerate it for a while, but I've had certain occasions where I would actually just get fed up with seeing it continuously remaining in that state of wanting to keep growing. So on a few occasions I've actually extracted things like that to get them back in the freezer to hopefully get them to the point where they're going to really be a material that no longer insists on trying to grow, but rather proceeds on to the stage of decomposition. But I'm not going to go out of my way for a little piece of Brussels sprout. I mean, if there was a whole bin full of this stuff here, and if it had been something that had been going that way for a long time without any progress, then I might have taken the extra effort to extract and return those things to the freezer. Now, we tried something a little different last time. We took the foods that we came down here with for the worms and we actually dropped them down into the sleeve of the sweater. Well, one sleeve is over here in this container in bin number 1, and sleeve number 2 is with the second half of the sweater over in bin number 2. And did I call this bin number 2 as well? Well, it doesn't matter. Sometimes I feel myself repeating back to myself in the back of my mind what I just said, and I just couldn't recall if I made a error there. I probably didn't. It was probably just my mind playing tricks on me. So it did seem like we bumped into another little piece of Brussels sprout wanting to continue to grow. But once again, I'm not going to sweat it too much. I've had occasions where I had a whole bunch of stuff wanting to continue to grow, and that was check-in after check-in after check-in until it really became sort of I don't know, it was almost comical that the stuff would just refuse to proceed to the breakdown process. Worms aren't going to bother anything that's trying to grow. Worms are interested in things that are already in the process of breaking down, and they're happy to come on in and help with that process. But if something's growing, they're not going to mess with it. They're just going to pass it by and look for things that meet their dietary needs. Alright, so let's see here. Here is, I believe, one of the sleeves. Is that right? Am I seeing that correctly? I'm always a bit reluctant to get my clean hand dirty. I do believe that when we did this last time, we came at it from the inside. There it is. Oh boy, that's interesting to see. In a lot of cases, when I tuck away foods, even as simple as just wrapping them in a piece of paper or dropping them into a coffee filter, it does seem to me like the worms struggle to find their way to the food items. But in this case, it seems like the worms are actually doing our bidding. And I guess by that I just mean the idea was to get worms down into the sweater via the sleeve specifically, so that that inner surface of the sleeve doesn't just sit there idle without any progress. It seemed like if there were food down in there, then the worms would be going in there for it and helping with the breakdown process. And I couldn't resist getting my clean hand out for this, but it's interesting to see that the one food item that we encountered digging down in there was yet another piece of Brussels sprout full of little things growing out of it, which I'm not going to react to, other than what I can't seem to resist, which is to try to break it up a little bit to help it along. And it does seem like there's another piece of it here, so perhaps the assortment of things that made their way into the sleeve over in bin number 2 were more interesting for the worms to feast on, leading to some worm traffic down in there. Whereas here, perhaps not so much interest. So let's see if we can follow the theme a little bit further by putting a little bit of the food that we have for them into the sleeve once again like we did last time, and hope for the best. See if the worms dig it. And I guess here I'm going to see about trying to get the stuff to slide down into the sleeve a little bit, so that hopefully it not only draws worm traffic but also helps the fabric not be matted up against each other with that little bit of stuff in between. So We've encountered some leftovers. Let's get them back down in the feeding area. Here too, let's see if we can jiggle some of their food down into that sleeve to help prop up the fabric from being up against each other that way. And even the way I'm spreading it out down here is meant to limit the amount of the material that's resting up on itself and obscuring worm traffic. And this stuff I'm definitely curious to see if the worms are going to appreciate it. I mean, I'm not that curious because this is not the first time I've taken corn cobs and put them into my little mini blender to create this sort of a flaky meal for them out of it. I've done it in the past and it's always seemed to me like the stuff just vanished 1, 2, 3. So that's kind of what I'm expecting here. That's a pretty vast departure from what one would normally expect to find by putting corn cobs into their worm bins, because corn cobs are an extremely tough material which the worms struggle to break down. Well, I don't think they struggle because they're not going to bang their heads against the wall and try something that ain't going to happen. They're just going to skip it and move on to look for things that are ready to be consumed and return at some point later, hopefully at a point where they can actually start to consume the stuff. But with corn cobs, it really does take some time. I do remember one weird anomaly where I put corn cobs into a system and it just seemed incredible because I could find no trace of it. Soon after, I think I even had to go to the video from the previous feeding to confirm that I had not just misremembered, and yes, I had placed corn cobs into a system, and with an extremely short period of time they were gone, but that was the only time. So I'm not sure what was so special about those particular corn cobs, but for me, corn cobs typically mean you're in for a long wait before that stuff can get broken down. So that takes us to the end of this check-in with the European night crawlers. And I'll be honest, I didn't go inspecting the fabric thoroughly to see if I could see any signs of breakdown. I really want that to sort of jump off the situation into my consciousness and be very obvious. I don't want to have to go searching around for stuff that might look like a moth had done it. And for that matter, I think that these chunks of wool did actually end up in our worm bins here because they had actually been part of a sweater that had been discovered by moths. And as nice of a sweater as it was, it already had some moth damage on it, so we wouldn't want to misconstrue any moth damage as worm bin progress. I would need to see something a little bit more significant before I would start to think that I'm seeing worm activity breaking down these pieces of fabric. So I'm curious, has anyone out there ever composted wool fabric in their worm bins? This is my first time, and I don't really recall any feedback from any other viewers telling me their experiences, but I'm sure there's people out there that have done it and can give me some sense of what to expect here. So please leave me a comment, let me know. And I guess I've soiled my hand that's intended to keep clean. I don't know why. I find myself doing that more and more lately. Alright everyone, that's it for the check-in. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.